Thank you everyone for joining us tonight for the third and last artist talk of the series. Programs for Faces in the Pandemic exhibition currently on view at the Frondron Library through November 15th. This exhibition is an attempt to contextualize the current time in history of 2020, an unforgettable year for many, highlighted by the pandemic, racial injustice, social unrest, police brutality, and the BLM movement. Today we have Antonius-Tin Bui and Jennifer Lynn Datchuk, two interdisciplinary artists whose works are deeply rooted in their gender identity as children of immigrants and as human beings who are concerned and passionate about the future of humanity. Antonius-Tin Bui, who goes by they, them pronouns, is a queer polydisciplinary artist with roots all over the USA. Since graduating in 2016 from the Maryland Institute College of Art, Antonius has received fellowships from the Vermont Studio Center, Kala Art Institute, Tulsa Artist Fellowship, Halcyon Arts Lab, Houston Center for Contemporary Craft, Yaddo, Anderson Center at Tower View, the Growlery, and Fine Arts Work Center. Jennifer Lynn Datchuk is the child of a Chinese immigrant and a grandchild of Russian and Irish immigrants. The family histories of conflict she has inherited are a perpetual source for her work. Most recently, she was awarded the coveted United States Artist Fellowship in Crafts, which is an annual 50,000 US dollar unrestricted awards recognizing the most compelling artists working and living in the United States. So congratulations for Jennifer. In 2017, she received the Emerging Voices Award from the American Craft Council. Datchuk holds an MFA of Artisanry from the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth and a BFA in Crafts from Kent State University. Currently, she is a professor of art at the Southwest School of Art in San Antonio. I'll let the artist take it away and share with us your works.
Thank you so much, Anne. Greetings, everyone. Thank each and every one of you for being present tonight. Lord knows we have all spent way too much time on Zoom these past several months. And with the debate, the 24-hour news cycle, the Supreme Court justice hearings, and all the podcasts, TV shows, movies, pornos, whatever you could be consuming at this time, it really means a lot that you're here with us. I'd first like to thank Anne for inviting me to be part of this very necessary and timely exhibition. It has been such an enriching experience working with you. I feel like a better human and artist thanks to our time together. I'm also very honored to be exhibiting alongside Jennifer Lynn Datchuk and all the other artists involved in this exhibition. Yes, to us. Presenting work at the Houston Asian American Archive immediately interested me for two main reasons. One, I rarely get presented the opportunity to show in the context of Asian Pacific Islander art for many reasons. There aren't many APIA institutions out there. Funding is very low, and oftentimes these institutions are more interested in artists from Asia as opposed to contemporary Asian Pacific Islander American artists. Two, I think about what an archive means and can be in the 21st century almost on a daily basis, especially when we consider each human a living and breathing archive of specific knowledges. Each of us are a reservoir of art histories, political histories, memories, hauntings, and so much more. I constantly think about the 10 theses on the archive, released April 2010 by Beirut. And I'm just gonna say some of my favorite points from this thesis. One, don't wait for the archive. Two, archives are not reducible to the particular forms that they take. Three, the direction of archiving will be outward, not inward. Four, the archive is not a scene of redemption. Six, historians have merely interpreted the archive. The point, however, is to feel it. Seven, the image is not just divisible. the text is not just assayable. Considering the Houston Asian American Archive, it predominantly consists of interviews. It is electrifying to see visual arts expand, inform, and recontextualize the existing material. With that said, I will begin a short little presentation. So the first image you see here is a photo of my family. I specifically choose this one because it really epitomizes the upbringing that I had in Bronx, New York. As you can see, there are many, many religious figures, historical, like the Virgin Mary, baby Jesus, and living, the priests within my family. Growing up in a huge family, it was often expected that every aunt and uncle have 4 kids and give 1 child to the priesthood. And that was an aspiration. Something else noticeable about this image is the whiteness apparent in the image. Everyone is wearing white, and I think that really says a lot about the whiteness that immigrants and refugees have to embody in order to, quote unquote, successfully assimilate into the US. And I also begin with this image because I love my family. I'm so grateful for their support of me as an artist, even after I came out as queer and non-binary. But at the same time, I think all of us should still be able to critique our families, learn from the traumas that they have passed on, and to really evaluate how can we stop these cycles of trauma as we move forward. And so when I'm thinking about my art practice, I constantly go back to the Maya Angelou quote, "I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. And this quote, "Who is worth my love, my strength, and my rage," by Mark Aguhar, really, really resonates with me. Mark Aguhar was one of the first queer APIA artists that I learned about. They unfortunately died in 2012 of suicide, just a few months before receiving their MFA from the University of Chicago in Illinois. And when I think about my family, I think about my biological family, but also my queer chosen family, the ancestors that I have never been able to meet, and how they constantly inform me, and they help me understand that I'm a part of this continuum, this queer art history that is constantly erased, forgotten, and attacked. And so these are just some fabulous images of Mark Aguhar. They were also polydisciplinary, working within performance, textiles, watercolor, collage. This is an image of them in performance. And I'd like to start again by asking all of us to recite a poem that Mark Aguhar wrote called "Litanies to My Heavenly Brown Body." And so the next slides are text from this poem. And I asked you, even though I can't see you, I asked that you recite the words aloud after I recite them as a way to honor Mark Aguhar and her legacy. Oh, blessed are the sissies. Blessed are the boy dykes. Blessed are the people of color, my beloved kith and kin. Blessed are the trans. Blessed are the high femmes. Blessed are the sex workers. Blessed are the authentic. Blessed are the disidentifiers. Blessed are the gender illusionists. Blessed are the non-normative. Blessed are the gender queers. Blessed are the kinksters. Blessed are the disabled. Blessed are the hot fat girls. Blessed are the hot fat boys. Blessed are the weirdo queers. Blessed is the spectrum. Blessed is consent. Blessed is respect. Blessed are the beloved who I didn't describe, I couldn't describe, will learn to describe and respect and love. Blessed are the daily victims of this white heteronormative patriarchal nation. Amen. And so when I talk about my work being queer, I constantly like to remind audiences that queer is a verb as well. It means to trouble, challenge, disrupt, question, reach, demand, radicalize, recontextualize, dismantle, reimagine systems of oppression. And it's so important for us to never forget queer history, those Black and brown folks, specifically trans people, who really led the way for our ongoing liberation. And so Mark Aguhar's work, alongside many, many other API activists like Yuri Kuchiyama, Merle Wu, Fred Ho, have really informed these pieces within the exhibition. These are laser and hand cut paper pieces, reclamations of traditional cut paper, with texts that really relate to my experience as a queer, non-binary Vietnamese American Slasian. The next project I'm going to talk about is the Missing Piece Project, which is a collective intervention at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in DC that I do alongside the founder, Dr. Kim Tran, and a group called Viet Unity. During a recent trip to the Vietnam Veterans Wall archive, we've realized that less than 10 out of the thousands of objects collected by the archive belong to Southeast Asian communities affected by the war. Since the erection of this monument, which Maya Lin designed, people have found solace within this reflective wall and have begun leaving objects belonging to their kids who may have been part of the war or their communities affected by the war. And every single non-living object is then collected and put within this archive. And so the Missing Piece Project is very interested in what that says about our narrative, the ones of Southeast Asians, of Vietnamese refugees. What does it say that we don't take up space within this archive? Our names are not reflected on this wall. The history that we are taught is a white imperialistic one of the white savior, one that really demands that Vietnamese refugees be grateful for their gift of citizenship here. And so what we do as a collective is create our own objects, ones that really, really unapologetically speak of our experiences. And every single April 30th, which is considered Black April in history, we come to the monuments and we put our own objects there as a way of forcing our narratives into the archive. And what's great about it is because it is a live performance, a live intervention, we get to engage with people who come by the monument on that day. And it's the second most visited monument in all of DC. So this is an image of me standing by Dr. Kim Tran, the founder. And having done this project for 3 years now, I think questions that we're asking ourselves are, why must we constantly respond to whiteness? What would a monument created by and for the Southeast Asian community affected by the war look, taste, feel, sound, breathe like? And I think this conversation is more and more tangible than ever, with monuments all over the country going down, specifically racist ones. And how do we imagine a monument in the 21st century that does not perpetuate the very singular narratives that so many of them held? How do we create monuments that allow for multitudes of perspectives, possibly ones that are constantly in flux, ones that allow for more curatorial movements? And so the next project I'm going to be talking about is the nurturalization test. I was invited by Philippa Hughes, who is a Vietnamese curator based in DC, to be part of a group exhibition at the Hugh Rich House Museum. And for this exhibition, I was really thinking about my parents, who consider themselves good Americans. They are devout Catholics who voted for Trump, and continue to insist voting for Trump. And not only are they single issue voters on abortion, but they really, really have ingrained this idea that they came to America the right way. And that undocumented folks are bad Americans. And so for this group exhibition, I was very, very inspired by Zoe Leonard's I Want a Dyke for President, which is this beautiful poem/manifesto that begs us to imagine people in office of all different backgrounds. What would a president with AIDS look like? Why don't we have presidential candidates that are Black trans women? Why is our imagination so limited? And why can't we demand more? And so I decided to interview my parents on their naturalization test. And it was so interesting because the part where my mom had to read a sentence, it said, "Today is going to be a good day." And that really resonated with me because every day in this presidency feels like a horrible day, like a life-draining one. And so what I decided to do was take the naturalization test and transform it into the nurturalization test. I took the 100 questions that are very didactic and demand singular answers, ones that people have to study in English, a language that's oftentimes forced upon us, and to respond the right way. So I was interested in an open-ended, collective answering of these questions. Throughout the night, we together as a group answered 50 out of the 100 questions. And I was in drag because I think it's so important for me to reimagine history, reimagine people in office, and why can't I be a Supreme Court justice? Why can't I be the president? Why has that never been a dream of mine? And it's because I never saw myself reflected in government. And so what was great is it was all volunteer based. One person bravely stepped up, and then from there, that person then asked a friend or had to introduce themselves to a stranger and ask them to then answer the next question. And together we were able to nurture one another and answer questions that really allowed us to imagine, like, what would a monument that you designed look like? What is an amendment that you'd like to see passed in this day and age? And so that's all I have to share with you all today. But I'm very excited to see what Jennifer has to present, what questions you may all have. And yeah, I'll pass it along.
Antonius, that was so generous, and I absolutely loved hearing you talk about your work. And I feel so lucky to share this space with you right now. I want to thank Anne and the Houston Asian Arts Archive for this opportunity, because when Anne asked me to record my oral story for this project, I first tried to back out of it because I thought I'm half is my how is my experience and my story a part of this? And so I just really appreciate being included in this too, because it's often I often have the experience, just like Antonius, of the immigrant experience, that we are in some ways Americanized or born here in America, that we have somehow lost part of our culture, but we've grown up entrenched in the culture of our family. And I think this third culture is a really unique experience to talk about. So Antonius, I talked about this really briefly. I start off with sharing an image of my family. This was before I was born, an image of my parents newly married, taken in New York City in the 70s. And that my father literally is cut out of the photograph. His head has been chopped off. That the photographer of this image was most likely one of my mother's Chinese cousins or friends who felt like he didn't belong there as well. Or that maybe he just wasn't going to be around much longer. And I laugh at this now, but I feel it was very appropriate on how my family navigated both sides of their families. and that I have many photographs where my father has been cut out of the image. And as you can see, he's way taller than everybody else. But I feel like this is a giant metaphor for my work. I make work about being half the daughter of an immigrant. I think of Naiya Wahid's quote, "My mother was the first country, the first place I ever lived." And I think about that all the time as the daughter of a Chinese immigrant and the granddaughter of Russian, Polish, Irish immigrants, how so much of the idea of the American dream was instilled in me, and that the pressure to succeed and live up to their standards was really high. But I make work from the perspective of being within this third culture, too white for my Chinese family and too Chinese for my white family, but of a very unique experience that neither side can fully understand. That I'm constantly asked the question, "What are you?" And people are rarely satisfied with my answer. I look at this picture of my parents. That's me, newly born, fresh, and brand new with a head full of hair. That my mother is categorized as brown, my father is very white, but me, as I navigate this world, I have been labeled nearly yellow. And I think about those experiences all the time because my parents, had, I can only imagine them trying to navigate an interracial marriage in the Midwest of like the whitest town in Ohio in the late 70s, early 80s, and how difficult they had to be, but they had no way to fully understand my experiences of being biracial. And I think this here is the perfect image of what it means to be an American family. I talk about this all the time, and I know people often say it's really heartbreaking, but I think being an adolescent is hard, but being the adolescent of an immigrant parent is sometimes extremely brutal. My mother would often tell me growing up that my teeth were bad, my nose was too big, I had too many freckles. Even though she was darker than me, I never fully understood that. And that my eyes were bad, but that I inherited all my flaws from my white father. And I wanted to be just as beautiful as her. That so much so that her name in Chinese loosely translates to the beautiful sweet plum. And I often think about how I can come from something so bitter and so sweet at the same time. I make work using porcelain. Porcelain discovered in Jinjiang, China over 2,000 years ago, desired all over the world for its whiteness as a material. People had never seen anything like this before. I use it as a metaphor for the desired whiteness I see in the world today as a privileged racial class. In this performance piece, I'm performing an act of domestic labor, washing slip cast, unfired ceramics, and returning it back to the bare earth. And then I use it to adorn my face. I champion the handmade, craft, and women's work in my work always. I am interested in the history of alphabet samplers, the ABC samplers that are part of, or that are considered the first form of female education here in the United States, where they learn their ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and always included their name and a morality clause. I decided to make an alphabet sampler of the racial and ethnic slurs I've been called. And as someone who has always been deemed half and not fully Chinese, American-born Chinese is that I am less than because I'm born here. But I often think I can only be American-born Chinese because my family had to flee communist China to make a better life here in this land. I've probably heard more of these comments. I've heard a lot of these since I was a little girl, with like the act and gesture of pulling your eyes to the sides of your head. But it's probably now within this current administration that I've heard these more than ever. And I think words are powerful, and that even though they are spoken into space, that by embroidering my hair through these shower drains I'm giving physical presence to the ugliness of these words. I think about too wanting to like destroy the ideas, the cultures, the stereotypes that I have to live with and navigate, not only as the daughter of an immigrant, but as a woman.
in today's world, and also trying to break through the stereotypes of the quiet, demure Asian, the tiger mom, the dragon lady. So I wanted to destroy that. And one way to do that was to destroy the garden that lives above my eyes by plucking all my eyebrows out while saying the nursery rhyme, he loves me not. And that the last eyebrow I plucked landed on my heart's intended desire. And I get really upset that I was taught that as a young girl, and that I was to seek my value and existence in that in men's eyes. With no eyebrows, what I did was I made porcelain blue and white aesthetics to adorn the bare space above my eyes, that they are plucked from a porcelain blue and white tray. The blue and white transfers are, imagery is made from ready-made transfers you can buy in Jindaejin of patterns that have existed for hundreds of years. That I first came about this on a research trip to Jindaejin, and I walked into a tattoo shop where it was not for skin tattoo, which is still sometimes seen a little taboo, but gaining more popularity as the West moves closer to the East, but of tattoo shapes for eyebrows based off of the shape, condition, color, and arch, coming from names of the Disney princesses. So I can come in and pick an eyebrow shape of Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Princess Jasmine. And this is where this aha moment came in my research of how porcelain blue and white pattern decoration from the East traveled the world along the Silk Road and became highly desired and coveted, to like these beauty standards of the West, the Disney princesses becoming global and traveling all over the world. And I'm deeply interested in those migrations of information, aesthetics, and beauty that travel and crisscross. I am a lover of blue and white pattern decoration, and as someone who also makes work about hair, I wanted to tackle the almost shameful and ubiquitous and rites of passage of having a bowl haircut. I think all Asians at one point have had them throughout their lives. We didn't somehow get to be part of the super cool like European bowl haircut trends, and it's also one of the most gender fluid haircuts. And it also really showed that we were victims of our mothers at home haircuts. I wanted to turn part of my body into an object, so I had cut my almost to the end of my back length hair in stages, and then bleached it blonde, almost white blonde, to look like it had a bowl on top of my head. I wanted to turn part of my body into an object. Having no hair, I started looking at different resources for hair. Wigs is something I've been really interested in as a way to like manufacture identity. Also, fully as a way to provide coverage and beauty to someone who has lost their hair to sickness or illness, but also because hair is one of those things where it's the first place that people see you, recognize you, describe you, but people make judgments and stereotypes based on the cut, color, and condition of it. I started buying bundles of hair off of eBay, my biggest form of procrastination, like my favorite resource in the world because it's anonymous and trying to reach out and talk to people. Black work is my version of the images I saw from hair dealers all over the world, where their bundles of hair would be placed in rooms with like little hints of the architecture and aesthetics that like helped me deem like the culture and place of origin of this hair. Like there would be piles of hair with an oriental rug, or piles of hair on things that would tell me, okay, this is Russia or Slavic hair, this hair's from Peru or Brazil. And same with China, I would see this like heavy carved wood furniture in the background. Black work is made from blue and white tiles of patterns from Jindaejin, with hair from a person I bought off of eBay whose mother owned a hair shop and only bought Beverly Johnson hair, the very iconic African-American supermodel who had her own hair line. And she swore she only bought really good quality hair from China. But even this hair, when I bleached it, it was gray. And here she got a Chinese fake hair, which I find really like ironic and interesting. I started buying these wigs that were made in China of Asian hair, but of styles I culturally and ethnically don't own. And I wear them as someone who can be seen as racially ambiguous, and I combine these photographs or performances with the object of these blue and white porcelain cones. Same patterns from Jin to Jin, but I almost wash them a little bit so they're faded, so their point of origin maybe isn't exact, or we can't pinpoint exactly what flowers there are. But thinking as we have these conversations, and I think of even making these in 2016 and like how we are having conversations about this in 2020 has probably moved a little bit, but probably not much. But as millennials, we are the most racially diverse of any generation before us. As someone who is half, I'm often told who, what, and what I can claim and what I can. And that when we have conversations about cultural appreciation and appropriation, I wonder, does cultural reappropriation even exist? And as we're navigating who has power, well, we do know who has power. It's the white patriarchy. That how can we as people move forward and be able to have these conversations without them being too ugly? And that's, I think these are still just really hard conversations to have. But looking at a whole hair industry that primarily is propelled by African American women, based off of white standards of beauty, but from the hair of women in the poorest of Asian countries. I think I've been called exotic all the time once people figure out that I am part Chinese. And it's something that often would be said when there would be a comment about my eyes, that exotic, I created this exotic AF trophy where she is a slipcast figurine from a hobby mold from the late 70s, early 80s, so kind of like my age. And she is the stereotypical Chinese girl haircut, wearing the rice picker's hat, carrying the heavy shoulder yoke with tons of materials in her baskets, and barefoot, resting atop a rubble of broken blue and white willowware shards that come from all over the world. Blue and white willowware is the most appropriated pattern in the world with no known central source or origin. And just thinking about the body and objects some more and how to document them through photography. I created these knuckle rings in 2017 during a time when I was away at a residency, but somehow became the American cultural translator of our political system and like why America is the way it is. I often found it really difficult when people would say like, why is your country voting for Trump? Why not Bernie? I'm on the same page with y'all. But I was the one they wanted the answers to, like why our school systems were so bad. And so these knuckle rings became my armor. Knuckle rings are used to protect your knuckles in a fight, but basic as a slang term I heard a lot that has gone through many iterations and meanings and probably means something a little bit different now in 2020. But even collaborating with a nail artist, I said, give me blue and white nails. And she went, oh, like blue and white pottery. And so that everyone has a general understanding of blue and white, that a lot of artists use blue and white in their work, and that almost the point, but that has become basic. And in Girl You Can, I'm making, still looking at craft and the macrame beaded curtains from the 70s as a way to make these curtains with beads with affirmations and adornment to help you navigate from one space to another as you cross different thresholds in your life. That when you walk through this curtain, you're lured by this red light only to be confronted with this really bright neon sign that flashes ching chong, of done in a stylized font that often is seen as stylized kanji and Chinese characters. I see this all over my travels. I'm always able to find where there's a Chinese restaurant or grocery store or an Asian business through this font. But this red light is so bright that I wanted people to have that feeling of when you're in a group of friends and someone tells a racist joke, and At first, you don't know how to confront it. To you, it feels like a slap in your face. You feel extremely uncomfortable. And I feel like as someone who can be racially ambiguous, I often have this dilemma of, do I out myself? What do I say? How well do I know these people? Where will this go? And thinking about making work during this time, Live to Die is a morality statement found at the bottom of an alphabet sampler. So, a really beautiful statement written by really young girls during a time where people didn't live past 30 or 40 years old and that life was so short. This is a statement that is put on top of red welcome mats, the welcome mats that meet you at the threshold of every Asian business. That I think about how we consume so much that we purchase things on Amazon really easily, very quickly. That demand, that prime delivery also comes with this idea that the objects in the world are limitless, but how we're able to afford these things, and because they are priced so cheaply, is from labor in other countries. I think about a lot how made in China has become a statement that equates cheap or poor quality. And I often wonder why their labor and their bodies are less than that of those here in America. So the figurine, the stereotypical China girl figurine, disrupts the stacks, the perfect lines of these with her existence. I saw this image floating around social media. I present to you the most American photograph, and this was on April 20th, when many states were opening, when the pandemic was still not fully was still not contained. That it was Black, brown, and yellow bodies were really forced to go back to work because there was no choice, and that how our country doesn't continually look out or support these people. I am really interested in back scratchers. I found an Oriental back scratcher at the CVS checkout for 99 cents, and like it clicked something in my brain about how there's still this extension of Asian body and labor as a way to help relieve your inconveniences of an itch on your back. So I scratch your back, you scratch none is a porcelain faux bamboo back scratcher with long red fingernails and adorned with crystals at the bottom. And always will go back to blue and white in my practice. Blue and white to me is just like a really huge metaphor for migrations of beauty, language, identity. In my practice, this babe cave is inspired by the man cave of being upset that there are such things as man caves, suggesting that domestic spaces are purely female, when I thought we were at this point in the world where domestic spaces should be shared equally amongst everyone, and that labor shouldn't be divided. But in this space, there's a blue and white table to encourage viewers to come and sit and have the difficult conversations. This table was made in collaboration with a family factory in Jindajan, China, with a wheel throne tabletop and slip cast porcelain stools adorned with imagery I've been like collecting for a while to tell the stories about like the difficult conversations of going from girlhood to womanhood, of being a woman and walking into all male spaces, or being a person of color and walking into all white spaces. That this private space can be to have those conversations and to really tell the stories about, I want the truth before you give me all the beautiful flowers. So thank you for your time. Please ask lots of questions.
Jennifer!
Thank you so much, and thank you for the presence of you two in the exhibition and in this talk, and learning more about your holistic body of works are truly amazing. And next, I was just wondering if Antonius could introduce some more aspects of the work, for example, the self-immolation / end your silences, that body of work. We would love to hear from you as the artist.
Oh yeah, so another piece within the exhibition are a line of Zippo lighters with text etched, what's it called? And the text is coming from Vietnamese American writers, lyrics from songs released during the Vietnam War era, anti-war slogans and protests. And it's just a way to reclaim this object that nearly every single American soldier carried through the jungles of Vietnam.
Thank you so much. And I'm just wondering, for you two who are both deeply rooted in terms of this use of hands, your ancestral knowledge and the craft, and how does it kind of influence your bodies of works in carrying that kind of weight of your ancestry?
Well, I think in some ways, like my family wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. So even just working this way is in some ways, I feel like my family saw it as a rejection of them. But I am trying to reclaim it and rewrite it as a way to like honor them and to like honor them in their struggles through this. But I think also growing up in an immigrant household, they were so extremely resourceful that I think it was really the foundation. That's really the foundation of an artist, is like how you can make something from nothing and your resources. I think I talked about this in my oral history. Like my papa worked in a sewing factory in Chinatown in New York. Her hands were always in the path of a sewing machine, to the point where he had an industrial sewing machine in the home. And he used to hate it because it was so loud. But then like my American grandmother worked on the assembly line of General Motors, and how they were two women, very strong and independent during times where they weren't considered to be. So
I completely agree with you, Jennifer. Similarly, I credit my parents and all of the forms of work that they had to pick up in order to provide for the 4 kids in our extended family. For instance, we have a history of working within the textile, hospitality, and poultry industry. So I also stayed up late at night, sealing bags, sewing things, gunning in the price tag to be sold in the market. And it was so strange to be putting our hands on objects that we ourselves couldn't afford. I'd also like to second this idea of now being able to almost like collaborate with our family and ancestors to really honor their narratives and histories, and to complicate what we have been forced to accept in this.
Yeah, because it's also like their stories weren't written down. And so we are like the vehicles for them. And it's like the expression of our artwork.
Thank you. And next, I was just wondering how the texts are so like very visible in you, both of your works in the exhibition, and this model minority myth, as in the title of Antonius' work, as the series Remodel Minority, and then in Jennifer's work is directly on the 2 ceramic dolls who are with slanted eyes and with very typical bamboo on the sculpture. Like, could you speak a little bit more about how model minority influenced your life and your work?
Yeah, I would say when I first started incorporating text into my work, I was very hesitant just because I wondered if I was being too didactic. But then again, I really thought about how Asian bodies are perceived to be very complicit, silent, apolitical, and that by incorporating text into the work, we were able to refute that and demand to be heard, seen, and embraced. And how this text is oftentimes, I'm thinking about your Ching Chong Glow, this act of subversion. It's luring you in with ornamentation, with beauty, with this exotic flair that many people enter Asian works with, and then like almost choke the viewer. Yeah.
I try to like embody tiny but mighty all the time when I'm thinking about my work, is that yeah, as a model minority, we're not expected to be to have a voice or to have power behind that voice. We always, I think, I think you and I have talked about many times about imposter syndrome. So
Mhm.
even like, I'm like, am I a model minority? I totally don't think so, but everyone perceives that I am. And that for me, I often question, like, is this text didactic and it's like too heavy-handed? Is it like just giving it all away? But I find like non-Asian artists, like non-Asian viewers or audiences have no idea.
Mhm.
So in some ways, it's like you're perpetually educating others.
Mhm.
And then like on the other hand, I'm always like, hey, what about me? Include me. I'm like Asian too. So I'm still like trying to figure this out.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, it's been so interesting to hear that art is a way to deal with so many like either personal or like issues in the current world, and like both of you works are so like talk so much about the intersectionality of race, gender, and like for Jennifer as like in girlhood and womanhood, and for Antonius is your career identity, and there's so many like power and advocacy. And I was just wondering, would would you would you consider the word like this artistic movement or term social engaged work is something that you identify yourself like your works with?
I know. How do you want to answer this?
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna try to give this a shot. I feel like this question has become more and more popular in the art world discourse more than ever. And the way I approach it now is I think it's more important than ever for every artist to be socially engaged, especially with the climate crisis, like just
Yeah, we haven't touched the surface. Like there's
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's like but okay, so I think when I think about art making, art for me is an acronym. It's art making, researcher, and teacher. And I try to embody all three of those roles as I navigate my career. And I think a lot about how people constantly ask, like, do you consider yourself an activist, an artivist, an artist? And I guess I go in and out of each of those roles throughout my life.
Yeah, I feel like it's always a struggle with labels. And I it just took me like a few years ago where I could openly say I was an artist, because that still felt like I would introduce myself first as like a teacher or professor. It felt shameful to be called an artist because I think I attached the stigma that like, well, I'm also like perceived as like artists just are free flowing, they have no cares of the world, when I think is making work about my experiences, my life socially engaged. It's definitely influences my practice, and that through those experiences I am hopefully tackling and showing there are a lot of injustices in the world, that I do believe that we are in some ways social justice makers,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that we are as artists responsible for the visual history of this world. And yeah, and I also only I've said this many times, I'm not an artist who makes work for art's sake. To me, I want nothing to do about that. I rather make work that has a strong message in this world and has a very clear point of view.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I definitely agree. I would say artists are prophets, and I'm thinking about your Babe Cave, and my favorite pieces of art are those that are portals into a reimagining. They allow us to breathe, to reset, and to view the world in a different context, a perspective, and expand our ability to imagine even further than ever before.
Yeah, well said. So beautiful. And I hope like, yeah, I hope audiences are able to see that. Sometimes I worry when, especially now, we're looking at so much work on social media, we have a tendency to like go through it really quickly, but to like spend time with it. And like the history of the Zippo lighter, I hope people spend time with that. Like when we think about too, like the school districts and like the education schools, are they even learning about these things? And so we are like supplementing the education that people aren't getting.
That was so beautifully said. Thank you both. And I guess actually, Antonius has a work that talks about being artists being put in boxes. The category is was that I guess yeah, one of the statement against being categorized. And so sorry for like asking that very question on the spot. And I guess next we actually have questions from the audience. So for Antonius, this is from Brendan Brooks. Who are some artists you would like to work with in the future, and what projects do you have planned for the future?
I really want to work with Jennifer sometime in the future.
You said
I'm just saying.
I'm here. I'm available. Thank you.
That would be the most badass Slasian collaboration ever.
You spoke it into existence. Now.
Yes. But also, I just finished my first collaboration with my sibling, Teresa Bui. And that was so phenomenal. And I really hope to continue collaborating with them. The innate trust that comes with working with a sibling, one who is also queer and trans, leads to just a brilliant level of empathy. And what am I working right now? I'm currently doing a lot of research on Afro-Asian solidarity and futurism, and really creating work inspired by the Bandung Conference of 1955, where 29 governments from Africa and Asia conjoined and talked about decolonization. So I really want to like resurface this history and yeah, reimagine Afro-Asian solidarity in the 21st century. Yeah. What about you, Jennifer?
I love hearing everything you talk about. Well, I'm gonna be collaborating with you, so that's on my list. I am researching Chinese propaganda posters as a form of like political resistance and like education throughout China. But I had saw one when I went to the Shanghai Propaganda Museum, which is in the bottom of an apartment building in Shanghai. I highly recommend it. But I saw one about birth control and it was called Later, Longer, Fewer. And the idea of birth control as a way to, well, first throughout China was to control women from having more than one. I think about that in relationship to like how birth control is really empowering in this country, of like giving women opportunity to say when and how they can have their children, and giving them more opportunities outside of the home. So thinking about that and researching like all these objects that I grew up with that were all about fertility, and that they're always with like young boys crawling all over them, of thinking about too, my family's home in Guangzhou has a plaque in it that traces back 28 generations, but it's all in the names of sons. So how even my story didn't matter within my own family. So I'm definitely like influenced by and live in total fear of Roe versus Wade being taken away, and just women's access and the autonomy of their bodies. So, you know, not fun stuff, but you know, I think both of us, there is like social justice within these research prompts we are doing.
Yay, we have more to look forward to. Thank you both. I guess if you have questions for each other.
How do you tackle research? Like, how do you start?
Oh, yes. Let's see. I've learned to really allow the universe to like drop seeds into my life and to trust my intuition. So recently, I got in touch again with Adriel Lewis, who is one of my mentors, who also did a project on Richard Wright's The Color Curtain, which was a book reflecting on Bandung Conference. And my partner, Brandon Brooks, is, what's it called? Yeah, we've been meaning to collaborate forever. And he's a Black man. And we were like, wait, why haven't we done a project on Afro-Asian futurisms yet? So, yeah. But in terms of research, we're currently in New Haven because he's at Yale. And I'm hoping to, like, get into their libraries and take advantage of the resources. But yeah, what about you?
I think it's a little bit of the same. It's kind of like whatever is floating in space that has somehow like dug a hole in my brain and then I get obsessed with. So definitely like that image of the AP image of the woman dressed in head to toe plastic doing another woman's nails, like spurred like investigations on like the managed hand and that like second class citizen labor that happens. So yeah, I guess maybe I'm also justifying my like trolling the internet all the time for things because those, I guess, yeah, like looking on eBay is research for me. Like,
it is.
Yeah. So I guess I feel kind of lucky that my like hobbies are also part of my research and my work.
Yeah, no, it's all part of our visual culture and history.
Yeah, for sure. And like we don't know how to have fun.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
We have another question. So I guess Antonius also touched about it earlier about artists being prophets, and what other roles does artists have in the society? I guess it's a question for both of you.
I guess I wish artists were more valued in society, especially maybe in this country. I think traveling to like residencies in Europe, like artists are funded. They are provided funding where they can live and make work. I feel like as an artist, we're juggling multiple things. And I guess what I would tell like a student and as a teacher that I wish it wasn't this hard. But if you really want to do this, you'll find every single way, everything possible to keep doing it because you have something to say. And there will be times where it feels like you can't do it anymore and you want to stop. I know I have like wanted to give up many times, and you can almost see it in my really long, my CV with the big gaps because I just, this is really hard, but it does get better.
Amen to that. Let's see, I wish everyone in society felt more empowered creatively and understood that they have the ability to create art as well. It's not just this mystical role that you have to get an education in or attend certain residencies, etc. That you yourself are able to manifest art, and that I guess this goes back to the student advice as well, but learn to define success, beauty, and art on your own terms.
Yes.
And understand that institutional validation does not make you any more or less of an artist. In fact, institutions depend on us. We make them.
Yeah.
And yes, and to Jennifer, it's time that we get our coin,
I loved everything you said. I think that is, we're always constantly trying to define success through like the eyes of our family, but like know that you have the power to create that on your own.
Yeah. Like it just blows my mind the fact that like a $50,000 prize is like the biggest prize, one of the biggest prizes in the art world, and people make like 100K plus, and we struggle just to get by.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
I unfortunately have to run to go to another lecture.
Yeah, no problem. I loved getting to talk with you, and we are going to collaborate soon. So
yes. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you everyone for attending. It really means a lot.
Thank you. I like super appreciate it.
Let's collaborate for real.
We have a mutual friend named Sarah that asked a question, but I will answer it, Sarah.
Oh yes.
DMs. I don't know.
I'm sorry, Sarah. You can DM me as well.
Bye, Antonia. So nice seeing you. Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
mwah, mwah,
It
mwah.
was like a lot of fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.